At this very moment, high above the clouds, where the air is dangerously thin and every breath demands extra effort, millions of people are living their daily lives as if nothing is unusual. Children run through mountain villages, yak herders cross endless grasslands, monks climb ancient stone stairways, farmers cultivate barley in fields that seem impossible to farm. To them, this is normal. But for the rest of the world, it seems almost unbelievable. The Tibetan plateau rises more than 4,500 meters above sea level, making it the highest and largest plateau on Earth. Scientists call it the roof of the world, not just because of its incredible elevation, but because it towers over almost every other landscape on the planet. For most visitors, spending even a single day here can be physically exhausting. The lack of oxygen causes headaches, dizziness, nausea, and extreme fatigue. Every step feels heavier. Every breath feels shorter. Many people cannot sleep properly during their first nights at this altitude, yet Tibetans have lived here for thousands of years. Not only have they survived, they have flourished. This raises one of the greatest questions in human history. How did an entire population adapt to one of the harshest environments on Earth? For centuries, people believed the answer was simple. They assumed Tibetans had gradually become accustomed to mountain life through generations of experience. But modern science tells a much more extraordinary story. The secret isn't found only in tradition. It isn't found only in culture. It is hidden inside their DNA. Over the last 2 decades, archaeologists, geneticists, and anthropologists have uncovered discoveries that are completely changing our understanding of Tibetan origins. Ancient skeletons, stone tools buried beneath frozen ground, hidden caves, and microscopic strands of DNA are revealing a story that stretches back tens of thousands of years. It is a story filled with migration, survival, evolution, and one of the most remarkable genetic adaptations ever discovered in human history. For many years, scientists believed humans settled the Tibetan plateau relatively late. The extreme climate made permanent settlement seem almost impossible. Long winters, freezing temperatures, powerful winds, and dangerously low oxygen levels created conditions unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Without modern equipment, surviving here appeared unimaginable. Because of this, researchers once believed that permanent communities only appeared after agriculture spread across Asia several thousand years ago. It seemed like the only reasonable explanation, but archaeology has a way of challenging old assumptions. Across the Tibetan plateau, researchers began uncovering evidence that refused to fit the traditional timeline. Stone tools emerged from ancient river terraces. Animal bones appeared beneath layers of sediment. Campsites were discovered in places no one expected humans to have reached during the Ice Age. One of the most important discoveries came from an archaeological site known as Nia Devu. Hidden beneath thousands of years of soil, archaeologists found hundreds of carefully crafted stone tools. When scientists analyzed the surrounding sediments, the results stunned the archaeological community. These tools were approximately 30 to 40,000 years old. That meant humans were exploring the Tibetan plateau long before farming, cities, or written history ever existed. These were not advanced civilizations. They were hunter-gatherers. Armed with simple stone technology, they hunted wild animals, gathered edible plants, and slowly learned how to survive in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. But an even greater mystery remained. Who were these ancient people? Were they direct ancestors of modern Tibetans? Or did another forgotten human population reach these mountains long before them? The answer began to emerge from a place thousands of kilometers away. In 2010, scientists studying a tiny fossil discovered inside Denisova cave in Siberia made one of the most important discoveries in modern anthropology. The fossil did not belong to a Neanderthal. It did not belong to a modern human. Instead, Its DNA revealed an entirely unknown branch of the human family. Researchers named them the Denisovans. Almost immediately, scientists realized they knew almost nothing about these mysterious people. Only a handful of bones and teeth had ever been discovered, no complete skeletons that existed, no ancient paintings, no written history. They were ghosts in the human family tree, yet despite the lack of fossils, their DNA told an extraordinary story. The Denisovans once lived across large parts of Asia, and their influence did not disappear with them. Thousands of years later, traces of their DNA still exist inside living humans. Now, where is that legacy more important than Tibet? As scientists continued searching for Denisovan evidence, another remarkable discovery changed everything once again. Deep inside Baishia Karst Cave, located on the northeastern edge of the Tibetan plateau, researchers uncovered an ancient human jawbone. Unlike previous discoveries, this fossil had survived for more than 160,000 years. Although scientists could not recover complete DNA from the fossil, advanced protein analysis revealed something extraordinary. The jawbone belonged to a Denisovan. For the first time, researchers had direct evidence that Denisovans were living on the Tibetan plateau tens of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. This discovery completely transformed our understanding of human evolution. It also solved another long-standing mystery. For decades, scientists wondered why Tibetans respond so differently to high altitude compared with almost every other population on Earth. When people from lower elevations travel into the Himalayas, their bodies immediately react to the lack of oxygen. The heart beats faster, breathing becomes deeper. The body produces extra red blood cells in an attempt to carry more oxygen through the bloodstream. At first, this response helps, but if too many red blood cells are produced, the blood becomes thicker. This increases the risk of blood clots, strokes, heart problems, and severe altitude sickness. Tibetans respond very differently. Instead of producing dangerously high numbers of red blood cells, their bodies use oxygen far more efficiently. For years, scientists searched for the reason behind this remarkable adaptation. Eventually, the answer was found inside a single gene known as EPAS1. This gene controls how the human body responds to low oxygen environments. The Tibetan version of EPAS1 is unlike almost any other found on Earth. When researchers compared it with ancient DNA, they discovered something astonishing. The gene did not originally evolve in modern humans. It was inherited from Denisovans through interbreeding that occurred tens of thousands of years ago. A small piece of DNA passed from an extinct human species into the ancestors of modern Tibetans. Over countless generations, natural selection favored individuals carrying this remarkable genetic adaptation. Those with the Denisovan versions survived more successfully at high altitude. They had healthier pregnancies, greater endurance, and a better chance of raising families in one of the world's most extreme environments. Slowly, generation after generation, this extraordinary adaptation spread throughout the Tibetan population. Today, it remains one of the clearest examples of human evolution happening in relatively recent history. And this is only the beginning of the Tibetan story, because the next question is even more fascinating. Thousands of years before the rise of kingdoms, before monasteries crowned the mountains, and long before Tibet became known to the outside world, the ancestors of modern Tibetans were already shaping a remarkable civilization. But they didn't appear overnight. Their story begins with one of the greatest migrations in Asian history. As the last ice age slowly came to an end around 12,000 years ago, the climate across Asia began to change. Glaciers retreated, grasslands expanded, rivers grew larger, animals followed new migration routes, and humans moved with them. Groups of hunter-gatherers gradually spread across Eastern Asia, searching for food, fresh water, and safer places to live. Some traveled along river valleys. Others crossed mountain passes that had once been buried beneath thick sheets of ice. A few of these groups reached the edges of the Tibetan plateau. For most people, the mountains were too difficult to cross. But for others, they became an opportunity. Archaeological discoveries suggest that small communities slowly began occupying different parts of the plateau. At first, these settlements were temporary. People hunted wild yak, antelope, and deer. They gathered edible roots, berries, and medicinal plants. As generations passed, temporary camps gradually became permanent homes. The people were no longer simply surviving, they were learning how to thrive. Modern DNA research reveals that these early communities were not isolated from the rest of Asia. Instead, they shared genetic connections with ancient populations living along the Yellow River in northern China. These farming communities cultivated millet, one of the earliest domesticated grains in East Asia. As agriculture expanded, some farming gradually moved westward toward higher elevations, rather than replacing the people already living on the plateau. They mixed with them. Generation after generation, cultures blended, languages evolved, knowledge spread. The descendants of ancient hunter-gatherers and incoming farming communities slowly formed the foundation of the Tibetan people. This explains why modern Tibetans carry a unique genetic signature. Their ancestry is not the result of a single migration. It is the product of multiple ancient populations coming together over thousands of years. Each group contributed something different. Some brought farming techniques, others brought hunting knowledge, some carried genetic adaptations for high-altitude survival. Together, they created one of the world's most resilient populations. But survival on the Tibetan plateau required far more than strong genetics. It demanded innovation. Among the first major breakthroughs was the domestication of the yak. Today, yaks are often seen as symbols of Tibet, but thousands of years ago, they became the key to survival. A single yak could provide milk, meat, wool, leather, fuel, and transportation. Its thick coat protected it from freezing temperatures. Its powerful lungs allowed it to climb steep mountain slopes with ease. For ancient communities, the yak wasn't simply livestock, it was life itself. Entire villages depended on these remarkable animals. Families followed seasonal grazing routes across vast grasslands. Children learned from an early age how to care for the herds. Even today, many Tibetan traditions remain deeply connected to yak culture. As communities became more stable, another important change began to take place. People started cultivating barley. Unlike many other crops, barley could survive the harsh climate and short growing season of the Tibetan plateau. Over time, it became the region's most important food source. Ground into flour, roasted, or mixed with butter tea, barley provided the energy needed to survive long winters and demanding physical work. This simple crop helped transform scattered settlements into permanent communities. Food became more reliable. Populations grew. Trade slowly expanded. The foundations of Tibetan civilization were beginning to emerge. But life on the plateau remained unpredictable. Earthquakes reshaped valleys. Snowstorms isolated villages for months. Avalanches destroyed mountain trails. Nature constantly reminded people that survival depended on cooperation. Communities learned to work together. Families shared resources during difficult seasons. Knowledge passed from elders to younger generations. This spirit of cooperation became one of the defining characteristics of Tibetan society. It wasn't just a cultural tradition, it was a necessity. As centuries passed, people developed a deep spiritual relationship with the landscape around them. Towering mountains were seen as sacred. Rivers became symbols of life. Lakes reflected the presence of powerful spirits. Long before Buddhism arrived in Tibet, local communities practiced an ancient belief system known today as the Bun tradition. According to these beliefs, every mountain, forest, and river possessed spiritual energy. Ceremonies were performed to honor nature and seek protection from unseen forces. Although many religious practices would later change, this profound respect for nature continued to shape Tibetan identity. Even today, many sacred mountains remain untouched because local people believe they are the homes of powerful spiritual beings. While culture continued to evolve, something equally remarkable was happening inside the human body. Generation after generation, natural selection continued refining the genetic adaptations that allowed Tibetans to survive at high altitude. Children inherited genes that helped them use oxygen more efficiently. Women carrying these adaptations experienced healthier pregnancies than newcomers from lower elevations. Over thousands of years, evolution quietly shaped the population. Unlike dramatic changes seen in movies, evolution happened one generation at a time, so slowly that no individual could ever notice it. Yet today, scientists recognize Tibetans as one of the clearest examples of recent human adaptation anywhere in the world. Their bodies represent thousands of years of survival under constant environmental pressure. This makes Tibetan heritage far more than a story of migration. It is also a story of evolution. By around 4,000 years ago, communities across the plateau had become increasingly connected. Trade routes linked distant valleys. Salt, wool, turquoise, medicinal herbs, and livestock moved between settlements. Ideas traveled alongside merchants. New technologies spread from one community to another. The isolated plateau was slowly becoming part of a much larger Asian world. Few people could have imagined that these scattered communities would eventually unite into one of Asia's most powerful empires. That transformation would change the history of Tibet forever. As the centuries pass, the scattered communities of the Tibetan plateau begin to change. Trade routes become busier, villages grow into towns. Powerful clans compete for influence across the mountains. For the first time, the idea of a united Tibet no longer seems impossible. Around the 7th century, one extraordinary leader changes the course of Tibetan history forever. His name is Songtsen Gampo. Under his leadership, rival clans are brought together, creating what becomes known as the Tibetan Empire. Within a few decades, Tibet transforms from a collection of isolated mountain communities into one of the strongest powers in Asia. Its armies expand across vast territories. They control important trade routes connecting China, Central Asia, Nepal, and India. Merchants carrying silk, spices, salt, horses, and precious stones travel through Tibetan lands. The empire's wealth continues to grow. For the first time, Tibet emerges as a major force on the world stage, but military strength is only one part of the story. Songtsen Gampo understands that a great empire also needs knowledge. According to historical records, he sends scholars to India to study writing systems and administration. Inspired by Indian scripts, they develop the first written Tibetan alphabet. This becomes one of the most important moments in Tibetan history. For centuries, knowledge has been passed down through memory and oral tradition. Now, history, religion, law, and literature can finally be written down. A civilization gains its written voice. Around the same time, another transformation begins. Buddhism starts arriving in Tibet. According to tradition, Songtsen Gampo marries princesses from Nepal and China, both of whom bring Buddhist teachings, sacred texts, and religious artwork. At first, Buddhism spreads slowly. Many Tibetans continue following the ancient Bun religion that has shaped mountain life for generations. Rather than disappearing, the two traditions begin influencing one another. Old beliefs blend with new ideas. Sacred mountains remain important, nature continues to be respected. But Buddhist philosophy gradually becomes part of everyday life. This unique combination creates a distinctly Tibetan form of Buddhism, unlike any found elsewhere in the world. The transformation continues during the 8th century. King Trisong Detsen invites the famous Indian scholar Padmasambhava to Tibet. According to Tibetan tradition, Padmasambhava faces enormous challenges. Many people believe powerful mountain spirits opposed the arrival of Buddhism. Legends describe him overcoming these forces and establishing monasteries across the plateau. Whether taken as history or symbolism, one fact remains clear. Buddhism becomes deeply rooted in Tibetan society. Monasteries begin appearing throughout the mountains. They become far more than places of worship. They serve as schools, libraries, centers of medicine, and institutions where art, philosophy, astronomy, and literature flourished. For hundreds of years, monks carefully preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost forever. Meanwhile, Tibetan artists create breathtaking murals, statues, and manuscripts that continue inspiring the world today. Yet, despite its growing influence, the Tibetan Empire does not remain united forever. Following internal conflicts and political struggles during the 9th century, the empire gradually breaks apart. Regional kingdoms emerge across the plateau. Power shifts from one ruler to another. Although political unity disappears, Tibetan culture survives. Language remains strong. Religious traditions continue. Communities adapt once again, just as they have throughout their history. In many ways, the collapse of the empire strengthens local identity rather than destroying it. Each region develops its own customs while still sharing a common heritage. Today, different areas of Tibet preserve unique styles of clothing, music, architecture, and festivals. These differences reflect centuries of local history. Yet beneath these traditions lies the same shared cultural foundation. Modern genetic research tells a similar story. Scientists studying Tibetan DNA discover that people from different regions show small genetic differences depending on geography and historical migration. Communities living closer to Nepal and the Himalayas display slight genetic influences from neighboring populations. Those living toward eastern Tibet show stronger connections with ancient East Asian groups. Despite these regional differences, the remarkable high-altitude adaptations remain common across the Tibetan population. The famous EPAS-1 gene continues to unite Tibetans through a shared evolutionary history that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Language also reflects this incredible journey. The Tibetan language belongs to the Sino-Tibetan language family, one of the largest language groups in the world. Over centuries, different dialects develop across the plateau. Although pronunciation varies between regions, they all trace their origins to the same linguistic roots. Language becomes one of the strongest symbols of Tibetan identity. It preserves history, poetry, religion, and the memories of countless generations. Another remarkable aspect of Tibetan culture is its deep respect for education. Monasteries become centers where students spend years studying philosophy, logic, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and debate. Intellectual discussion is encouraged. Students challenge one another through structured debates that sharpen reasoning and critical thinking. This educational tradition continues influencing Tibetan society even today. Medicine also develops in unique ways, storing knowledge from India, China, Persia, and local traditions. Tibetan physicians create a medical system focused on balance between the body, mind, and environment. Many herbal treatments are based on plants growing naturally across the high mountains. Some of these remedies continue being studied by modern scientists. As trade expands, Tibet becomes a bridge connecting civilizations. Merchants traveling along branches of the Silk Road carry not only goods, but also ideas, religious beliefs, technologies, languages, and artistic styles move across Asia through these mountain routes. Far from being isolated, Tibet becomes an important crossroads between East Asia, South Asia, and Central Asia. Its influence reaches far beyond the plateau itself, but history never stands still. Over the following centuries, new political powers rise across Asia, foreign empires expand, borders shift, trade routes change. The Tibetan people once again face new challenges that will shape their future. Yet through every period of change, one thing remains remarkably constant: their connection to the mountains, their unique culture, and the extraordinary heritage that continues to define one of the world's most fascinating civilizations. History continues to move forward. Empires rise, empires fall, borders change. Governments come and go, but the Tibetan people remain deeply connected to the land that has shaped them for thousands of years. Today, the Tibetan Plateau is home to millions of people living across what is now the Tibet Autonomous Region and neighboring provinces of China, as well as communities in India, Nepal, Bhutan, and many other parts of the world. Although modern life has transformed many aspects of society, the traditions of Tibetan heritage continue to survive. Prayer flags still flutter across mountain passes. Ancient monasteries continue to echo with chants that have been recited for centuries. Families still prepare sampa, the roasted barley flour that has sustained generations. Yak herders continue guiding their animals across the same high-altitude grasslands their ancestors crossed thousands of years ago. The landscape has changed little, but science has changed everything we know about the people who live there. Over the past 20 years, advances in ancient DNA have completely transformed our understanding of Tibetan origins. Researchers are now able to recover genetic information from bones that are tens of thousands of years old. Each new discovery fills another missing piece of humanity's story. What scientists once believed was impossible has now become reality. By comparing ancient genomes with modern populations, researchers have confirmed that Tibetans possess one of the clearest examples of natural selection ever observed in humans. The famous EPAS1 gene continues to fascinate geneticists around the world. Unlike most populations, Tibetans do not respond to low oxygen by producing dangerously high numbers of red blood cells. Instead, their bodies use oxygen with remarkable efficiency. This adaptation reduces the risk of altitude sickness and allows normal daily life at elevations where many outsiders struggle simply to breathe. Even more remarkable, this genetic advantage did not originate in modern humans. It came from Denisovans, an extinct human group that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. This means that a small encounter between two different human species in the distant past continues to help millions of people survive today. It is one of the most extraordinary examples of ancient DNA influencing modern life. But Tibetan heritage is far more than genetics. It is also a story of resilience. For thousands of years, people have adapted not only to harsh climates, but also to changing political landscapes, economic challenges, and social transformations. Despite these changes, language, religion, music, art, and traditional knowledge continue to connect generations. Visitors often notice the breathtaking scenery of Tibet first: snow-covered mountains, crystal-clear lakes, endless grasslands. Ancient monasteries perched on rocky cliffs, yet those landscapes tell only part of the story. The real wonder is the people who have learned to live in harmony with them. Even modern medicine continues learning from Tibetan biology. Scientists studying high-altitude adaptation hope these discoveries may eventually improve treatments for heart disease, lung disorders, and conditions caused by oxygen deprivation. In other words, the survival strategies developed by Tibetans over thousands of years could one day help people around the world. That is the power of human evolution. Small genetic changes, combined with countless generations of natural selection, can completely transform how a population survives. The Tibetan story also reminds us that human history is never simple. There is no single origin, no single migration, no single defining moment. Instead, history is built through thousands of journeys: hunter-gatherers crossing frozen landscapes, farmers bringing new ideas, ancient civilizations exchanging knowledge, cultures blending over centuries, and people adapting to challenges that once seemed impossible to overcome. Every generation leaves something behind. Sometimes it is language, sometimes it is culture, Sometimes it is a tiny piece of DNA that changes the future forever. The story of Tibetan heritage is ultimately the story of humanity itself. A story of courage in the face of impossible odds, a story of adaptation when survival seemed unlikely, and a reminder that our greatest strength has always been our ability to evolve. Long before satellites mapped the Himalayas, before scientists unlocked the human genome, before archaeology uncovered forgotten civilizations, the people of the Tibetan plateau were already writing one of the greatest survival stories in human history. Today, that story continues. Every child born on the roof of the world carries within them the legacy of countless generations, the determination of ancient hunter-gatherers, the resilience of mountain communities, the wisdom of monks and scholars, the strength of yak herders crossing windswept valleys, and even the distant genetic legacy of an extinct human species. Few places on Earth tell such an extraordinary story. A story where mountains shaped biology, where evolution changed destiny, and where one of humanity's greatest mysteries became one of science's greatest discoveries. The roof of the world is more than a place. It is living evidence of what human beings can achieve when they adapt, endure, and refuse to give up, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson Tibetan heritage has to offer. No matter how difficult the environment, no matter how impossible the challenge may seem, humanity has always found a way to survive.